help. I just spilled. Covered verses 18 and 19. And here's 18. In that position of self-realization, by practice of knowledge and renunciation in devotional service, one sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. So that's just review, that's the verse. Prabhupada explains in the purport that full freedom from illusion is made possible only when we practice devotional service. And it makes sense. What's our constitutional position? The healthy, natural position of well-being of the living entity. And until we come to that position, we're not going to get... Some illusion is still going to be acting upon us, because the picture will be incomplete. Our happiness will be incomplete. So we want complete happiness, we'll be looking for something. Oops. And, as Srila Prabhupada writes, it's a very nice portrayal of this message, but devotional service itself is so powerful, everything is revealed. That everything is Krishna. Just like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya being amazed at the elucidation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on Vedanta Sutra and the Atmaram verse of the Bhagavatam. And because he was such a super scholar, when he heard the elucidation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he realized this isn't a scholar, a superior scholar. This is the supreme... He had realization of Lord Chaitanya's position. And Lord Chaitanya, when that submission and acknowledgement came, Lord Chaitanya disclosed his spiritual form of the Sadbhuj form. This is a little different. So, there's not a slide for text 19, but text 19 was speaking about the stage of perfection. That sounds very high, and it is very high. Stage of perfection is very high. But for that stage of perfection, devotional service is necessary, no matter what other... Put the Bhagavatam up. Yeah. Whatever activity that one may engage in that's beneficial or elevating, necessary, completely necessary, is devotional service. So now, text 20 is, how does devotional service begin? This subject, this topic that's been elevated to such a exalted position, how do you attain it? How do you even begin it? So the answer is given is through association in one who has it. Association in one who has it. Association in one who has it. Bhakti is transmitted. Bhakti is transmitted. Bhakti is transmitted. Bhakti is transmitted. Bhakti is What are the verses? It's a Bhagavad Gita quiz question. What are the verses in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna refers to Mahatma? 2 verses. Raise your hand. Okay. Some Mahatmas are Durlabha. Vasudev Sarvamiti Samahatma Sadurlabha. And Daivi Hiesha Gunamai Maya Duratya Mam Eva Ye Prapadyante Mayamitam Tarantite. So the great souls take that position of taking shelter, and that means letting go of the other shelter. It's another way of saying this is Prabhupada speaks of, with every Vedic statement, with some injunction, there's a prohibition. Do this means don't do that. And even if it just says don't do that, what do? You do this. Like the beginning instruction of Bhagavad Gita. Tolerate duality. So what do? You invest consciousness in that which is non-dual. Nasate vijate bhavo, na bhavo vijate sataha. It's the mind. It's a binary processor. You do this, you don't do that. You don't do that, you do this. So where does your mind, where does consciousness, where is it to be invested? So Sankhya is needed, knowledge is needed to know where to go and where not to go with your consciousness. Rendering service to the materialists has the opposite effect of Mahatsevam Dwaram. If anyone offers service to a gross materialist or a person engaged only in sense enjoyment, then, by association with such a person, the door to hell is opened. Not very inviting. Same principle is confirmed here as in the 5th canto. Attachment to a devotee is attachment to the service of the Lord, because if one associates with a sadhu, the result will be that. So this is, what's the result of a sadhu? One way is the doorway to liberation is open. But how is the doorway to liberation opened? That sadhu will teach him to become a devotee, a worshipper, and a sincere servitor of the Lord. These are the gifts of a sadhu. So this is going to be explained further in the upcoming verses. So this is now establishing some principles. Again, in the purport, Prabhupada is saying 2 things. The sadhu will give us instructions. The purpose of sadhu sangha is not to improve material conditions. I've got a medical problem. I got a financial problem. I'm going to start a business. Please give me your blessings. Om Jaya Jagadisha Hare. How does it go? A new car, a house by the sea, Om Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Not that. But he will give us instructions how to cut the knot of the contamination of material attraction, and how to elevate ourselves in devotional service. A and B. So, Devahuti is speaking of Kapila as the axe, but the axe is the instruction, and she has to take the instruction, take the axe and chop the tree. Not the sadhu comes and chops your tree. You have to do. But here's the strength to do it. Here's the instruction to do it, and with the instruction to do it is the strength to do it. The one who has faith realizes the strength to do it is within the instruction to do it. Yes? It's Prabhupada's teaching, and it's also the realization of a faithful person. But the one whose faith is not sufficiently strong thinks, oh, I can't do it. And one whose faith is sufficiently strong, it may be difficult, but the instruction is there, so I'll do it. Again, this morning, one can climb a mountain, even if you're lame, if there's faith. The capacity for Mission Impossible becomes available, accessible, possible, through faithful execution of an instruction. What if one's faith is not so strong? Work with what you have. That which you can apply, you apply to your capacity, sincerely. And what happens is realizations will come, and faith will grow, and strength will grow. And the influence of the material energy will subside. That's the realization of a faithful follower. Go back to how Prabhupada treats this. First I'll state the principle. He writes, consciousness is the platform of attachment. So one can say it's the senses, or the mind, or the intelligence, but behind them all, driving them all, is consciousness. So where do we place our consciousness? And that will determine, if it's Krishna consciousness, we'll place our senses here and not there. And the mind here and not there. And the intelligence here and not there. So he begins, here it is clearly stated that attachment for one thing is the cause of bondage in conditional life, and the same attachment, when applied to something else, opens the door for liberation. Attachment cannot be killed. It simply has to be transferred. In other words, it's innate for the soul. How do we know? From experience, but also in the purified condition, there's attachment to Krishna. So if you're not attached to Krishna, are you going to be attached to something else? Is attachment innate to the soul? The answer is yes. According to the modes of nature, you'll be attached to something else. So why is it hard? Because we're attached to something else. We're very strongly conditioned to fruitive activities and speculation. I've said this many times. Prabhupada was once asked by a reporter, Swamiji, how long does it take to become Krishna conscious? Prabhupada's immediate answer was less than a moment. And in that less than a moment, two things. Tendency for speculating to understand truth and reality needs to be given up. And the other, tendency for trying to be an enjoyer of the material energy. Just those two things. Generally, people are attached to those two things, and therefore the process of bhakti is generally gradual. But all it takes is those, less than a moment, those two things. Transfer attachment from asat to sat. Tolerate the duality of asat and invest in Krishna through the process of hearing and dissociating, hearing from sadhus, associating with sadhus and serving them. Consciousness is therefore the platform of attachment. Key message right at the front end of these verses. That's the message of this verse. It is clearly stated here that when we simply purify the consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness, we attain liberation. Then he says it again, something he said already. You can't make consciousness zero. You can't make attachment zero. So, but it needs to be purified. Transfer to Krishna. We see that if someone has no object of attachment, if he has no children, then he'll transfer his attachment to cats and dogs. He's referring to in explicit manner, he refers to the estate of the man who built the Fisher Mansion. He had no children. So in his will, he gave his estate to his dog. Body by Fisher, maybe it doesn't mean anything to you today, but years ago, when automobile industry was really booming, at the very beginning of the automobile, Henry Ford, and then Body by Fisher. As famous as Henry Ford was, Body by Fisher. So he was enormously wealthy. He didn't have any family, so he gave his wealth to his dog. I don't know what happens. How does a dog sign, I accept? And then when the dog dies, what happens? Anyway, whatever the laws of America are, the point is, that if not attached to something, it's to something else. And if it's not attached to Krishna, it's something else. And one leads down and the other leads up. This indicates that the propensity for attachment cannot be stopped. It must be utilized for the best purpose. Our attachment for material things perpetuates our conditional state, but the same attachment, when transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead or His devotees, is the source of liberation. That's the first paragraph. And we've already covered the third paragraph, so there's just the middle one left. The middle paragraph, Srila Prabhupada is speaking about who is a sadhu. There's already some benefits of a sadhu, leads to liberation and detachment from matter. Who is a sadhu? A sadhu is not just an ordinary man with a saffron robe or a long beard. A sadhu is described in Bhagavad Gita as sadhu eva samantavya. Where's that in Bhagavad Gita? 9:30 Bhagavad Gita. Apichet siddharacharo bhajate mam ananya bhak. So one who is engaged in ananya bhakti, sadhu eva samantavya. So a sadhu is described in Bhagavad Gita as one who unflinchingly engages in devotional service. Then he paraphrases what that verse is saying. Even though one is found to not be following the strict rules and regulations of devotional service, that is, there's some accidental slip, if one simply has unflinching faith in Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is understood to be a sadhu. Sadhu reva samantavya. Then he turns it around and says a sadhu is a strict follower of devotional service. Before, it's if they're not a strict follower, but they have faith, now then it's a strict follower. Because if you have faith, you're a strict follower. And there may be some accidental something, but not regular deviation from, but a strict follower. The classic example is the tide comes and the tide goes. The tide comes and the tide goes. So there's a high tide, low tide line. And then some circumstance, and here comes a tidal wave, or tsunami. They got the nice Japanese word now. And here comes a tidal wave. And the tide doesn't stop at high tide. It just keeps going and going and going and going and going and going. And the land that's normally not covered by water becomes covered by water. But after some time, the tidal wave subsides and it's back to high tide, low tide. So, similarly, circumstantially, there's this regulation of the strict follower. And then some circumstance comes along and the material energy just overwhelms, circumstantially, overwhelms the strict follower. I've heard lectures where Prabhupada at 26 2nd Avenue was describing somebody that has a tendency to smoke cigarettes. So that doesn't apply to any of us, but if someone had that tendency and then he's a devotee and he's around somebody that's smoking cigarettes, then he may smoke a cigarette just because of that past tendency. Prabhupada gave that as an example of a circumstantial fall down. He knows better, is a bad habit, bad association circumstantially. But then quickly, immediately restored to the right position of strict follower. That's when this verse Sadhureva samantavya applies. Such a person can be considered saintly. Why? Bhajate mam ananyabhak. Undivided devotional service. And circumstantially something, and then undivided devotional service. Immediately. It's not an excuse or a loophole to go in there and do nonsense things and I'm a sadhu because I do a lot of devotional service. So it's okay. It's not okay. Strict follower. Circumstantially only, not willfully, in other words, just circumstance. One should be very careful. Very careful about what circumstances we allow ourselves to be exposed to, because we're strict followers. And we're in some circumstance and it's not Krishna conscious circumstance. So we say no because we're a strict follower. But some overwhelming circumstance and foolishly one becomes covered. But to qualify for this standard of sadhu, immediately come to one's senses, dry land again, not covered. Follow the regulations of bhakti. It is recommended here that if one at all wants to realize Brahman or spiritual perfection, his attachment should be transferred to the sadhu or devotee. And the last little quote, Lord Chaitanya confirmed. Lava matra sadhu sangi sarva siddhi hoy. So it begins, sadhu sangha, sarva shastre koi. All the scriptures say, lava matra sadhu sangha, sarva siddhi hoy. All perfection. One thing, all perfection. And stay steadfast in that position of sadhu sangha. And what does sadhu sangha mean? You hear, you serve. Just like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, taditi pranipatena pariprashnena seveya. And then the dense darkness of illusion that Devahuti expressed she was experiencing and feeling, is removed by the light of transcendental knowledge and the transcendental association at once. In Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's two more things, and our discussion is over. On this verse, Vishwanath Chakravarti makes the following comment, and I'm going to quote. The cause of bhakti is association with devotees. The door for liberation, and he explains, that means starting with salokya, not the other kind. So salokya, samipya, sharsti. What's the other one? Sarupya. Meaning excluding Sayuja Mukti. The door for Vaishnav liberation is open through association with a Vaishnav. The cause of bhakti is association with bhaktas. However, such liberation is only an unsought result for the pure devotee. And that goes back to text 13, when he first began speaking with Devahuti. These fruits of bhakti are not the reason to pursue bhakti, at least to come to the higher standard, the standard of pure devotional service. They're byproducts, they're secondary. It's not the purpose for taking up bhakti, at least one who understands it properly. And the other point is this. I'm going to go to text 23, and in text 23 it connects with 22 or 20, this morning's verse. These two types of attachment. It's a theme that's been repeated previously and now in this verse. So, what's the result? Result of one is material misery, material entanglement, material engagement, material existence. And the other, not just liberation, but ultimate liberation, same as text 13, Nikshayasaya. It's thought of Krishna, continuous ecstatic thought of Krishna. And our constitutional position is restored. And there's a transcendental happiness. Because of that transcendental happiness, all other so-called happinesses are insignificant. A very nice example of that is, well, the Bhagavatam's example is a glowworm. But I've never seen a glowworm. I've seen fireflies. Anyone seen a glowworm? Never seen a glowworm. You've seen fireflies. So firefly. So, little anecdotal story. I was once visiting in Italy. I wanted to visit a god brother. This is years ago, Sundarupa Prabhu, who was functioning as the regional secretary in Italy, and he was doing a fantastic job with book distribution and then brilliantly following up with book distribution. He called it contact Sankirtan, people that got books, because a lot of their book distribution in Italy was, and I think it still is, door to door. And they went in dhotis, and tilak, and door to door. When they would meet people and they would buy a book, they knew where they lived, so they would go back and say, "How'd you like the book? Did you read it yet?" They talk about the contents, bring them some prasadam and another book, and continue to follow up, and people became Krishna conscious in their home. And part of the inspiration from it, or for it, was statements in Prabhupada's writings that he would say, distributing door to door, or preaching the message door to door. That's what they did. So I went to visit. They had a huge congregation based upon book distribution and follow-up Sankirtan. And they had one of the places that I visited was Villa Vrindavan. It's a very beautiful place. And one of the things, he took us for a tour, and one of the things they had done was they stripped out all of the vineyards for making wine in Italy, and they put in cow pastures. I think they're growing grapes again now, but anyway, they did that. And they took us down to the bottom of the hill, just like down. It was this giant bull. The guy was big as a house. He was huge. And, his snorting through his nostrils and big horns and moving his feet on the ground. And, I don't want to stand around this guy if he gets out. We're finished. It was an intense guy. So he was the father of all the cows. They just, anyway, let him loose and whew. So, and by that time it was becoming dark. The sun had set and we were going back up to the top of the hill. And we were walking, there was the fireflies. And there was a zillion fireflies, and zoom, 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 and no control tower. They just didn't bump into each other. They somehow navigated their way around, and it was better than fireworks on the 4th of July. It was really amazing. And I was just marveling at how do they do it? Krishna, he's got the radar system without all the expense. And then I was thinking, we see them at night, but they're probably doing the same thing at the day. We just don't even see them. They're flying around, doing their thing, flying around. But you don't pay any attention to it at night. I mean, during the day. It's just at night, because there's no light. So that little light of the firefly is, wow. You know, the little kids going after, trying to grab one, but then you get a handful of them. So, in the daytime, what's the light of a firefly? At night, the light of a firefly, very significant. So, similarly, when the light of transcendental knowledge is illumined through sadhu sangha, what's the light of Professor Puffy Wuffy? I mean, somebody that speculates this and that and the other thing. And the opulence of beauty queen so-and-so or something. Just unattractive. Literally unattractive. Like the firefly during the daytime. But if there's no transcendental knowledge and no beauty of Krishna, then something looks attractive. So the position of transcendental happiness, this is what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying. When there's transcendental happiness, the happiness of material happiness just is insignificant. Insignificant. Not a big deal to say, no thank you. In America, now you have to, commonly, they don't serve anything for meals. If they do, you have to pay. And now it's becoming like that in India too. But for a while it was India. You get on a little, mini journey and they got to come through the cart with their cart and veg or non-veg. And my answer is no thank you. Veg or non-veg? No thank you. Well, you want veg? No thank you. You want anything? I'll take some water. But, because who wants it? Even if it's veg. Besides, the way that the consciousness with which it's prepared. No thank you. And possible. It's not just the discipline, the rule that says you only take that which is offered to Krishna. Certainly that's there. The strict following of the regulations. It's just not attractive. But something that's prepared very nicely with full devotion to Krishna, you're fully satisfied. Just one last little anecdotal thing. When Burijan Prabhu started the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education, I really appreciated the effort that he was making to bring devotees together to systematically hear and study Prabhupada's teachings in different topics. So I volunteered to participate and I thought this would be a nice way to spend a month of Kartik in Vrindavan, doing some service, teaching. So I was teaching regularly during the Kartik month. And one of the things about teaching in Vrindavan is having a diet that matches something that this body it suits. So during that period of time, there was a devotee. He's now left his body, but his name was Vibhu Chaitanya. Maybe some of you may have known him from years ago. He had a back problem. The back problem was so severe that he couldn't stand straight, so he walked like with this part of his body like this, but his back like this. But then also his arms or shoulders or whatever it was, he had his arms behind him like he was a bird ready to take off. That's just how he moved. And he would come every morning, exactly on time, for greeting deities, and took him a while to pay obeisances before each of the 3 altars. And then he went into the deity kitchen, and he didn't come out again until after the Rajbhog offering. He did all the deity cooking until the Rajbhog offering. Then he would go to his room, take prasadam, first meal, and then take a little rest and go back into the deity kitchen for the rest of the evening. And he did that every day for years until his body became unable to do that. So, with a little association with Vibhu Chaitanya, I developed such appreciation for him, for his Krishna consciousness. He spoke a little English, and I didn't speak any Hindi, so it was just affect. It was just exchanges of feelings more than conversation. So I made an arrangement with him that I could receive 1 leaf cup of Mahaprasadam from the Rajbhog offering that he cooked every day. And I think for breakfast it was milk and chikus, and for lunch it was 1 leaf cup of Vibhu Chaitanya's Mahaprasad, or cooking of Radhashama Sundar's Mahaprasad. And that was it for a whole month. And again, milk at night. And I wasn't hungry. I was satisfied. Now it's, if I did that at some places where I travel, people would be very disturbed. That's all you're eating? Maharaj, what's wrong? But my point is, it was so satisfying. My mind wasn't thinking, my body wasn't thinking, something more or something else. It's completely satisfying. Because it was very clear, the realization was, it was the devotion that he invested in what he did that was so satisfying. The senses were satisfied. The body was satisfied. The mind was satisfied. The soul was satisfied just by imbibing, receiving from him his devotion through the medium of his cooking. Applying the principle of bhakti works. Very important. And therefore, one of the principles that Prabhupada taught us, I don't want to make an administrative faux pas here, but Prabhupada said those that touch fire for cooking should be brahmanas. So their consciousness is purified. Others can help in other things, preparing and so on, but touching fire must be brahmanas. As much as worshipping the deity must be brahmanas. So, I don't want to make a stir here, but it's the principle that consciousness should be pure. And there's standards. Besides your body should be clean, and your so forth, your mind and your consciousness should be clean. That's ideal, especially with Radha Krishna deities. And when you take that which is offered, prepared by those persons and offered by those persons, the effect is altogether different. The person who receives that becomes very satisfied. So that may not, I may be saying too much here. So there may be circumstances because of the preaching activity that's going on that's not always followed. Fine. Those persons that are liking to do cooking should come to that standard. the temple should help them come to that standard so that they're qualified and in that state of consciousness, and whatever is offered to the deity is of that quality. And the preaching will be more effective. It's not just tasty. This person makes something that tastes. They have chefs that their lifestyle is something else. They may be able to make something tasty. That's not our standard. Our standard is bhakti and pure mind, pure consciousness, pure body, and prepare in that way. And it's not just the cooking. That's especially related to the deity. It's like that. But other activities that we do, ideally, should be like that, and bring others as far as possible to that standard. That's what our temple is for. There's the mass of personalities, and then there's those that are leading. Once people start coming and taking part in Krishna consciousness, those that set the standard. And all are the ones that are supposed to be setting the standard here. So, come to that standard. If you're not there, work towards that standard and come to that standard. And others will, the benefit will be maximized. Not just here, wherever someone serves. That's the training that Prabhupada gave us. Okay, so any comments or questions? Yes.
Well, so it appears that despite having the knowledge, the ability to apply what is being taught comes from sadhu sangha.
No. The ability to apply comes from faith. That within the instructions from sadhu, the ability is within the instructions, carrying it out. It's not, in other words, the editing that I'm doing here is, it's not that the sadhu sangha is going to lift you. The sadhu is going to pick you up from this place and put you in that place. It's our application. And the strength for application comes from faith in and following of the instructions, and the person giving the instructions, and the source of the instructions, the scriptures, comes from faith.
Okay, thank you, Maharaj. And this question is with a practical application. So you were mentioning how, there may be instances where you have opportunities to enjoy and you have to learn to say no because you have more attraction to transcendental happiness. But from a very practical point of view, material energy being so strong and the tendency to enjoy being so strong, what should be the thought that should come into one's mind when you see a situation where you are having opportunities to enjoy?
Very simple. Krishna is stronger. Very simple. And I have a relationship with sadhus, those who are guiding me in Krishna consciousness, and I don't want to violate that relationship. Even the pulling is there. It's not, and this is not just you, it's a principle. This is one of the reasons why, for our youth in Krishna consciousness, they're having a relationship that helps steady them when their strong senses and newly discovered sense of independence may have a tendency to carry them here suddenly, or there suddenly, that they're checked by, I can't act outside of this relationship that I have with someone that's very dear to me and cares for me very much. I can't violate that. A loving relationship protects one. from impulses, born of sense contact, however strong it may be. Love is a position of safety. And loving relationships need to be encouraged. For both things. Someone else? You got one, Diti? Okay.
You said by associating with a materialist, then the door to hell is opened. Does that mean that we aren't allowed to make friends and stuff in school?
Sure, you can make friends and stuff in school. And what's a friend?
Just someone
Hang
to
out?
be with. Yeah.
No. Hang out is not friends. A real friend, I'll send you a little attached file that shows what a real friend is. A real friend is someone, a real friendship is you're helping to elevate one another. Accept another person, you help them another step going forward. That's real friendship. And hanging out is not. That's the other kind. So, met some of your friends because you brought them to the house. And some of the things that you do with your friends is neutral. It's not elevating. It's not degrading. It's just spending time together, doing things you enjoy together. But because they know who you are and who your family is, in the back of their mind, if not the front of their mind, is there are some things in your character that are different. Not just the food that you eat is different, but there are things in your character that are different. So you can give Krishna conscious association to your friends just by of good character, and they'll understand. They may not be clear and explicit about what it is that's different, but you're a little different. You don't get angry, and so on and so on. You're steady, happy, and polite, and well-mannered, and that way, if that's actually what you're carrying inside you, they're becoming attracted to an unknown whatever it is within you that makes you special. And at some point they'll start asking, hey, what's that something? I mean, they may not ask it that way, but it'll give you an opportunity to say. Or, I'm sorry, I can't come I'm going to the temple for Janmashtami, or something like that. Or, we're fasting today because I can't have one of those. Oh, what's that about? So it's your character of Krishna consciousness, the bhakti that you're carrying inside you, that should always be there. I'll just get very explicit. Some things, sometimes, there he is. Bruce Bay, take care of him. Nobody exists but me. What's wrong? Okay, so something to avoid, and I'm not just speaking to you, it's all of us, and especially the nice young devotees we have here. One of the things that young devotees report is, I have these two roles. My role in school, where I'm just like everybody else, so I'll fit in, and my role at the temple. I have these two personas. They have to wear this one, and then take that one off and put this one on, take this one off and put that one on, and gets a little confused. Right? Yeah. So, when you're in school or when you're with your friends, what's inside shouldn't change. And even if you don't see clearly what the opportunity is, if there's a desire within you, let me somehow, same in the workplace for you, mom, dad, and all the adults, somehow, my dear Lord Krishna, somehow, let me somehow give something of spiritual value to these friends, these people in the workplace, these people I'm with. It may not happen. It may not be so evident right away. If that desire is there, you're protected. Because the other is, I want to be accepted, and they're doing these things. God knows. That's not what, I don't believe in it. It's like, fuck. But I want to be accepted. So where do I compromise? You just don't compromise. It's just no thank you. Just like you're not going to eat some of the stuff they eat, you don't compromise. No way. Forget it. And some of the other things that they say or do, and etc. I don't need to get graphic. You've seen and heard plenty of it, so you know better than I do. It says you don't compromise, and you're happy. They want to do those things and speak those things, and so what are you doing? You're being a devotee. You're thinking, I'd like to give them a higher taste. So here's some, certainly prasadam, but what other thing? So at least let me be a happy devotee. I'm happy being who I am. And just be that, because that's who you are. You're a happy devotee. And you don't, so that's protection. You can be a devotee in school. You don't have to have this other persona. And things that you would do when the devotee friends come to your home that, you would do in front of your mother and not just in the room when they're not watching. In other words, just do those things with your friends too. If they want to go off and do something else. And with this big smile. Like, they may not like me if I don't do those things. You're happy. And when they see that you're happy, they'll be attracted to that. There's a certain group that are bullies and, that type. You don't do this and you're no fun. Hey, go ahead and do your nana thing. That's all right. Be happy you can do it. I'm happy. And you're just consistently happy because you're carrying bhakti in your heart. And some persons are going to go, hey, what's happening? What's your secret here? How come you're always happy? You really want to know? Here's, then you tell them something that you think that they can hear. Not something that's going to blow their mind, but something they can hear. And you're just consistent like that. You're not everything. Let's sit down and read Krishna book together with the kids, because they're not going to be interested in that. But something that you can share. If that's in your heart, you can help, you'll be protected, and you can help them make a little step. And you're their friend. And if they're ready to see that, that's a real friend. So they haven't been brought up in a family like you've been brought up and have the association of so many nice devotees in their life as you have had. So you're fortunate. And your goal is not to look down on them or to become like them so that you'll be accepted by them. Your role is, in whatever way you can, Krishna gives you the ability, the intelligence, and the empowerment to do so. Extend something that can help them take one step. Great. That's your role. That's who you are. In the company of your friends. Politeness should always be there. This is more for the householders, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaks about what unwholesome association is in the workplace. Just cordial dealings is fine. Oh, how are you? How is your family? And those activities. But what's not to be done is, can you give me some advice about my family or something, or my life? And we don't enter into those kinds of discussions with people that have unwholesome habits. We're polite. In those everyday exchanges, that's not the contaminating kind of association. In fact, if we didn't do that, people would become critical of Krishna. We don't want that. Don't make offense. Let them appreciate. That help? Yes.
Maharaj, there is actually a question online.
Okay, question online.
Yeah, so it says we sometimes see newcomers cooking in the kitchen under the guidance of a Brahmana. Is that okay?
Ask Hari Vilas. In part, it has to do. The answer has to do with policies of the temple and a particular event that's being cooked for. And we want to encourage people to have some service. I don't want this to go back to Hari Vilas and saying, "Why did you speak about this?" And so, best, ideal, is if the Brahmana cooks, and that by setting example, the other person learns not just technique, but consciousness. Ideal. And that person can become qualified to do the same in course of time. That's ideal. It may not be practical for whatever the reason. So that's an administrative decision. And I don't want to go into the territory of deciding what policies should be for this temple, that temple, the other temple, and the temples that I'm responsible for. When there are circumstances where you want to encourage people, and the circumstances are such that this works, then that may be an local administrative decision. And always in mind should be, this is the ideal, and we strive for the ideal as much as we can.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the class. I just have a question. Srimad Bhagavatam is all about pure devotional service, about bhakti.
Yeah.
And in a certain poem by a Vaishnava, I don't remember his name, he says bhukti and mukti are two witches.
Goswami, right, in Nectar Devotion.
Okay. And but I see this word mukti being used in a lot of verses in Srimad Bhagavatam. Why is there so much stress on mukti if it is not conducive?
Nice question. You know the discussion between Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, after he became a devotee, complains Vyasadeva made a mistake. Mukti Pade Swadhyaya Bhak. He should have said Bhakti Pade. And he gave his reasons. Like, your reasons. Lord Chaitanya, appreciating Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, before you were this smarta that just, all you knew was mukti. And now you're against mukti. And you just must be bhakti. You've been transformed. But then he explained that it was not a mistake because the only giver of mukti is Krishna. Mukti Pade is the giver of mukti, that's Krishna. So Bhakti Pade would have also been appropriate, but it's not inappropriate to define. Vyasadeva didn't make a mistake. In a similar manner, in his Sandarbhas, not sure which Sandarbha, Bhagavat Sandarbha, I think, Jiva Goswami explains a long section that wherever it says in the Vedas Brahman, it should be understood. It's indicating Krishna. Maybe it's Krishna syndrome. Because Brahman is but the effulgence of Krishna. We have so many verses, and so we should understand it's implied. It may not be directly stated Krishna, but it's implying Krishna. And similarly, there's primary and secondary meanings within Sanskrit, and so, as with Mukti Pade, the primary meaning is it's Krishna. Now, in some cases, there may be some secondary meaning, that is to say, the Sayuja Mukti, as with Shishupal receiving Sayuja Mukti, then it's that other kind. But otherwise, it's implied. Where it's used, it's implied. And again, it's this question that Mataji asked earlier about this sentence here. How do we understand it? Take it in the bigger context, and that's what mukti means. It means complete liberation. But there's no more chance of coming again to the material condition. That's devotional status. Okay, anything else? In the front.
Maharaj, Bhakti actually eliminates all the different sins, like sin in the seed stage, sin is maturing, and the matured sins and the reactions and so forth. So, in the lives of devotees, like say Parikshit Maharaj or Chitraketu, do we understand them as the reactions of their sins, of their mistakes that they suffered, or is it just the mercy of Krishna?
It's neither. And the situation of Maharaj Parikshit is different than King Chitraketu. In the case of Maharaj Parikshit, read the commentary carefully, and it explains, Krishna induced Maharaj Parikshit to act the way that he acted, purposefully, so that Srimad Bhagavatam could appear. And Srimad Bhagavatam was to appear on the occasion of Maharaj Parikshit's passing. So, for the transmission of Srimad Bhagavatam to be fully effective, it needs a qualified hearer. So that's Maharaj Parikshit. He became the qualified hearer, the receiver of the message of Bhagavatam from the qualified speaker, Shukadeva Goswami. So the circumstance was induced by Krishna from within his heart. In the case of King Chitraketu, there was nothing done wrong. There was no mistake. Parvati made the mistake. He made no mistake. He was speaking in a very friendly way with Lord Shiva, and Parvati, not understanding the intention behind his words, had something else into his intention and cursed him. But that also provided the opportunity for Lord Shiva to elucidate what's the standard of unalloyed devotion. And King Chitraketu exhibits that standard of unalloyed devotion, undisturbed by any circumstance. Svarga, avarga, narakeshu, apitul yarta darshana. Seeing them equally. So it was to glorify, in one sense, the position of King Chitraketu and his unalloyed devotion.
So, bhakti, so it also removes the reactions to the sins, like you are completely... There is
not only the reactions to the sins, but the tendency, residual tendency is also removed. Okay? Something else? Looks like we're done. I'm sorry.
Maharaj, maybe because of lack of proper understanding or something, even among devotees, if there are different, let's say, standards they, let's say, live for or maybe follow. So in that case...
What was the word? Live first?
No, they follow, let's say.
Okay. Different standards they follow.
They follow.
Okay.
So in that case, if one is offered something which is not according to one's standard they are following, how best to deal with the situation without offending or hurting other person?
Depends on the person. Depends on the standard. Depends on the circumstance. You have something in mind?
Maybe you can take the example of cooking.
Okay, I assumed. Let's take the example of cooking. So you're invited to someone's home, and they don't keep the same standard that you keep at your home. Now, what do you do without offending? It depends on the circumstances, depends on the person, depends on the standard. I can't give an easy answer. Depends on those variables. The fact that you're concerned to not offend, fantastic. You're 90% of the way there. Because if that's the mood, genuinely, then probably the person's not going to be offended. If you say something, they'll probably understand the purpose behind it. So here's another layer of answer. There may be different standards, but at least if that standard is an acceptable standard, it's a non-issue. Different standard, but an acceptable standard. I do that all the time when I travel and go to places. But here's one recent example. Something that I take a little trail mix, something that's in case I'm stuck in an airport, something, and so I have some prashadam. I had finished, so I gave it to someone. Could you refill this? So they had something they refilled. Somebody else, I'm reluctant to say it because tomorrow I'll have a whole box full of trail mix. Someone heard I had asked for that, so they brought something in a little plastic container that was... So I thought, after I had received it, I waited